Chinese President Xi Jinping made a state visit to Seoul before making trips to Pyongyang or Tokyo. The meetings between he and President Park Geun-hye made a lot of headlines. Along with bilateral economic matters, Presidents Park and Xi looked at a host of other developments in Northeast Asia, including the North Korean nuclear issue and Japan's shift to the right. The two leaders agreed to complete FTA negotiations by the end of this year, but protesters have made their opposition to the possible deal well known. Japan expressed its displeasure with Korea and China's united front by lifting sanctions against the North on the day of the bilateral summit.
북한이 새벽 4시 50분과 58분 두 차례에 걸쳐 단거리 탄도 미사일을 발사했습니다.
North Korea conducted missile launches before and after the South Korea-China summit, raising tensions on the Korean peninsula. The dynamics in Northeast Asia have been shifting. On today's Upfront, we assess the rapidly improving Sino-South Korean relations.
Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Upfront. I'm Nahyun-kyung.
I'm Yoo Jong-soo. On today's Upfront, we discuss rapidly improving South Korea-China relations and Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent state visit to Seoul.
And for that, joining us today is Ambassador Hwang Byung-tae, who served as the former South Korean ambassador to China, and Dr. Kim Han-kwon from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you both for joining us today.
Let's first look at the political dynamics in Northeast Asia region after the recent summit talks between Korea and China.
Now, the prevailing view is that the paradigm has shifted, right? The old paradigm being the U.S., Japan, South Korea versus China and North Korea. I mean, would you say that's a fair assessment that the old paradigm has shifted?
I think more than a paradigm change, whole structures have completely changed. China became, as of last years, suddenly became the number 2 world powers. And many estimate that China will overcome in terms of their gross national products the United States. So the Chinese people are boasting that they will surpass even United States by 5 years later. So this means that China is a normal old country. Old country was locked in the ideological the confrontations, and there was a kind of their ideological broke countries, but they left that talks, and they the sailing in the Pacific, and they become worldwide countries. So in old days, North Korea was a kind of comrade in arms.
Body.
Yeah, bodies. But the normal comrade in arms. Just a normal kind of neighbors. So this is quite changed. And Xi Jinping come to Korea, he was thinking in terms of the general picture of the world affair, their concerns, no more concerned with North Korea. So many Korean local papers say that Xi Jinping came to Korea before going to North Korea, as if it is a big event. It is not a big event. This is a normal kind of the happenings.
So it's natural for him to visit South Korea first. Would you agree, Dr. Kim, that China is no longer a confined country?
Most of all, I agree with Ambassador Hwang's points. I'd like to add to one point is that there's recently Sino-Japanese relationship become another key issue to understand the dynamics of Northeast Asia. Also, the U.S. government supports for extending Japan's military and security role in the region. That can be another issue we have to watch carefully.
As we can see, China has now started forming new relationships with its neighboring countries. What are your thoughts on this development?
Yes, the Chinese government, especially end of last year, whole top leaders gathered together and they discussed reviewed their neighboring countries, and they shifted their neighboring countries to offer more public goods and share their economic benefits with neighboring countries. It is because they concerned the most important regional power structure between US and China. Now the bilateral relations are going more fierce competition between the two countries. Probably the Chinese government has to concern this new competition era.
Ambassador, what do you think on this matter?
Well, let me tell stories. Last years, when Xi Jinping met Che Yong-hae, who was the planetary ambassador of Kim Jong-un's, and he tried to meet Xi Jinping in Beijing's 3 days, and finally he was able to meet him without any uniforms. And next days, Xi Jinping left for United States, and he met President Obama and his the colleagues in Rancho Mirage in Southern California. It was unofficial meeting, but a long meeting, overnight talks. And according to the newscaster, Obama and Xi Jinping talked over 8 net hours. Especially on North Korean issues. And it was, us, changing, big event, because United States and China was, enemies during Korean War times, when North Korea was involved. And now, since 1953, first times US and Chinese leaders met together, and they discussed it earnestly, how to disarm, how to denuclearize North Korea. And they talked long times, and they come to one agreement that there should be no more nuclear in North Korea. So now what remains for them to do is how to execute that kind of denuclearization. And at that times, they discussed about what is mean available for China. China said that we have big, weapons to pressure North Korea. That is oil and food. With this kind of items, we will engage in implementing our agreement to stay here. This was unthinkable, big event.
Right.
And Joseph Nye, who was the Harvard University professor, said that that meeting was comparable to Nixon and Mao Zedong's meetings in 1972, more than meaningful, because two countries met together, discussed North Korea. It's ideological, four. So this is this fact revealed that China completely changed.
Right.
No more concerned about North Korea as allies or the comrade in arms.
So China is definitely resetting its relationship with neighboring countries. Let's go back to the summit talks between President Park Geun-hye and Chinese President Xi Jinping. I mean, it wasn't the first time that the two leaders met, but what made this summit so special to gain attention, especially from the U.S.?
When Xi Jinping come to these times, people come up with the story, their agreement. Important item is, so-called denuclearization of North Korea. And the two sides agreed to oppose nuclearization of the North Korea. Frankly speaking, this was a repetition what they already promised in the United States. And in China, policy decision to denuclearize North Korea is already made. Remaining things, how to implement. So they are now exercising that kind of implementation the stage.
So we will talk about North Korea shortly later on. But Dr. Kim, in your opinion, what do you think made this summit between President Park and President Xi interested? Why was the U.S. so interested in this summit in particular? It's their 5th time meeting. It's not the first time.
The first of all, the recent President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul has broken the pattern of top Chinese leaders visiting North Korea first, then visit South Korea. Some people say it is a token of most strengthened ties between China and South Korea. But I'd like to note that not strengthened ties, but should say it is South Korea's strategic value to China has increased ever since the end of the Cold War era. Secondly, the central agenda of economic cooperation between the two countries has some meanings to U.S. For example, the FTA negotiation, the establishment of China proposed AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The last one is the launch of the one yuan direct exchange market in Seoul. That can produce frictions with US-led TPP, the role of the US dollar in the world society as a key currency. The last one is also, it is make conflict with US-Japan-led ADB, Asian Development Bank. That's why US also pay attention on this summit.
So Dr. Kim, do you think then South Korea and China enjoying their strongest tie ever?
I think so, yes. First of all, we has accumulated strategic trust between the two countries. The best example was the President Park's visit to Beijing last year. And this time, we also exchange our strategic interest between the two countries. This is the very good sign for improving the two countries.
Now, some may or may not agree with what we are saying here. So let's hear from some other experts. We have a couple of short interviews lined up today. Joining us first is Dr. Douglas Powell, the Vice President of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, Dr. Powell, how do you assess the current situation in Northeast Asia?
Well, in Northeast Asia today, we've got more tension than we've seen in quite some time. On the first level, we have a kind of structural shift in power as China raises its capabilities and its activism. And we also have a Japan which is responding to that by expanding the space for its activities, such as the new decision by the cabinet in Japan on collective security interpretation of the Constitution, and some other adjustments being made in the cooperation between Japan and the United States and the alliance. At the same time, we have, on top of that layer of structural change and tension, we've got political tension that has come in concomitant with the rise of the conservative wing of the LDP in Japan to power and the holding of the prime ministership. We have a set of attitudes and ideas about revising history that are causing tension between Japan and its neighbors and making it very difficult to expand the level of cooperation between Korea and Japan.
Some say trilateral relations among Korea, China, and Japan have remained friendly for a long time, but are now entering a period of conflict. Do you agree?
I think conflict is the wrong word. We haven't had any breakout of conflict yet, but we certainly have higher levels of tension, and certainly from an American perspective, much higher levels of tension between Korea and Japan than we would ever wish to see. Japan and Korea, we need to be able, in the context of a growing Chinese capability in the region, we need them to pull together more than ever. And I should think that capitals Seoul and Tokyo would also see this as a moment when they would want to show their collective strength. The good news in all of this is that the Korean government under President Park has a very clear notion of the strength of the alliance and is not allowing the political problems to more than enough to express itself, not allowing those political problems with Japan to affect the way the governments operate on important matters of national security.
What would be the best way to improve Korea-China relations in order to stabilize the current situation in Northeast Asia?
Well, I think that the stronger trade and investment relationships are the bedrock for managing a lot of the contention that will arise naturally as every relationship, such as Korea and China's, continues to grow. There are opportunities for Korea as a middle power in the Asia-Pacific region and Northeast Asia to take the initiative on some issues that are pestering the region. I think that the Northeast Asian Peace Security Initiative that the President announced in Washington when she made her state visit is an example of working on non-traditional sub-security matters that might bring us to patterns of cooperation in Northeast Asia that we've not been able to achieve. We tried to get close on that with the six-party talks. We had a high point in 2005 and 2008, but it's since deteriorated quite a bit and the prospects there are not good. Therefore, we need to turn to this other idea that the President Park has raised, in addition to her trust building with North Korea, which of course will take a lot of time.
All right, so still a lot of issues to be tackled on that front. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for your analysis today.
Dr. Kim, the joint statement by Korea and China include the major issues such as a future FTA, Japan's conservative path, and the denuclearization of North Korea. What did South Korea actually hope to gain through the bilateral talks?
I think there were three important elements must discuss between the two countries. In terms of FTA, South Korea wants to China to focus less on the open South Korean market to China's agricultural products. Second one, in terms of the Japan's conservative path, the South Korean government did not want to mention during the summit. But as a result, the two leaders showed their deep concerns over the Japan's conservative path during the press briefing of a special lunch on the second days. The last one is in terms of denuclearization. South Korea government wants to use the term denuclearization of North Korea, whereas the Chinese government wants to use the term of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but the result was the latter, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
And President Xi Jinping actually brought a huge number of economic delegation. Is that telling us something? Did he want to focus more on achieving economic and solving economic issues, but in the end it didn't really turn out that way?
First of all, the China's national top priority has been stable and constant economic development since Deng Xiaoping's open up and reform policy in 1978. Probably the Chinese government focused on take economic benefits from the summit. But at the same time, the central agenda of the economic cooperation during the summit has interconnected with strategic interest. For example, the AIIB also is the competition of the US and China influence of the East Asia. So probably the first focus on the economic cooperation, but at the same time, China has to think of the strategic interest.
There is one important element determining, course of action is national interest. National interest, determined to be time to time by each country. So motivating thing should be the national interest. China's will be motivated China's interest. Korea will, motivated
motivated by
now,
its own
second,
interest.
how to reconcile two different interests. That is, negotiation and discussion, talks. So dialogue. So, we can talk any kind of thing within two countries as long as two countries are matured countries. So only problem is how to select a certain item which is convenient to interest of both countries and promoting interest of both countries. So this is better to be negotiate and talk. So in case of the FTAs, it's quite natural. So two countries, developed economically at high stages, and so interdependence of countries, very beneficial. So China has its own way how to promote better national interests. Korea also better interests. Now they are converging on agreement to have a sort of the FTA agreement. So FTA agreement is the first kind of thing at the topic of the two discussion. Now we look what will go on from now on, but that is just a normal kind of the development between two countries.
Now Korea, South Korea and China are on a normal relationship,
yes, normal
as opposed to the past, it quite wasn't. So, I mean, diplomatic ties between two countries can almost never be exclusive, right? They are intertwined with relations with the neighboring countries as well. So let's break down the relationships in Northeast Asia and see how they affect one another.
The national interests of the countries that make up Northeast Asia have changed. North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons has damaged its relations with both South Korea and China. And Japan's relations with South Korea and China have taken a turn for the worse due to historical and territorial differences. But North Korea-Japan relations have been improving, a development that has been watched closely by the international community. The U.S. has gone head-to-head with China, with both hoping to take the lead in Asia. And has shown its support for Japan's collective self-defense push. The leaders of Seoul and Beijing met amid the complex dynamics that have now taken hold of the region. Korea and China reaffirmed their strategic cooperative partnership at the summit, suggesting a new relationship in the shifting diplomatic landscape that is Northeast Asia.
All right, so now that we saw the report, we have some tricky questions coming your way.
First, which country do you see as most likely to raise regional tensions?
Oh, some people say it is Japan because Japan extend their national interest under the context of U.S.-China competition structure. And also I'd like to point out that it is the U.S. Because the U.S. government wanted to establish South Korea, U.S. and Japan a trilateral security cooperation system. But now the China and South Korea's relations has rapidly improved. And so then also Chinese government, the trilateral regional security cooperation system can be a direct threat to China. So the Chinese government hold South Korea not to move rapidly to U.S.-Japan alliance. So from the U.S. position, the improvement relations between China and South Korea can be a very important factor to fulfill their eventual goal to Northeast Asian strategic interest.
Ambassador Huang, how do you see this issue?
Can you pinpoint the country?
Which country?
Previously, Korea, Japan, United States was engaged in sort of the ideological actions. So against the communism, against China, against North Korea. Now that target has become changed. And now, as I mentioned earlier, even 3 countries is going to engaging in the normal type of the national interest, pursuance interest. And Japan is doing all kinds of different things. They are pursuing their own national interest policies. Korea is also own policy. Now problem is in promoting that kind of policies, there are certainly conflict each other's and confrontations. So this is going to be discussed and solved. And now in Japan's the comfort woman case, also rearmament case, this is their own national personal national interest. And how it's going to affect the other country is to be discussed with other countries. Now Korea and Japan, China is reacting some aspect of their recent policy. This is quite natural of integration between normal countries. So we forget about old age of ideological confrontation, ideological the thinkings. We must think pure in terms of the national interest. So this is what Kissinger called the real politics.
Real politics.
Well, Dr. Kim, many people have said that the U.S. Might raise concerns over the improved bilateral relationship between South Korea and China.
Right.
What's your opinion on this issue?
We have to see this issue in 2 ways, short-term and long-term perspective. In short-term, probably the U.S. government very carefully watch the improving relations between China and South Korea because they have very important strategic interest in Northeast Asia. But in the long term, we have to see that we have to understand that China and the U.S. both government do not want to see return of the Cold War power structure like U.S., Japan, South Korea versus Russia, China, North Koreans, the confrontations, because this confrontation will not be very useful to fulfill protect their core interest of the U.S. and China. That's why they want to, in one way, the U.S.-China are showing the contents of the strategic competition, but on the other hand, they also using their strategic channel to produce cooperation to the regional structure.
I mean, but you mentioned the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank earlier. China wants South Korea to get involved, but Washington doesn't. So what would be a wise move here for South Korea?
During the summit, the Chinese government explained and desired their will to establish AIIB. And the South Korean government listened very carefully and evaluated the proposal of China. But at the same time, we have a strong message from the U.S. government not to join in the AIIB. It is a kind of a testing example among the 3 countries, how they align their economic interest as well as political interest in the region. For me, there is no good answers, but we have to keep our principle, whatever 2 countries ask to South Korea, but we have to have our own decision based on South Korea's own national interest.
And Ambassador Hwang, what would be a wise move for South Korea here? I mean, China wants South Korea to be involved, but Washington doesn't.
It's quite natural for any country to propose a certain scheme of cooperations based on their own national interests. And at the issue between the U.S. and China is who is going to have hegemonies in the major decision-making international body. For instance, AIE is a sort of the regional banks, the standing opposition to the ADBs. ADBs, the under influence of the United States and the Japan's. So to eye of United States, Chinese sponsorship of that kind of bank is going to delegate authority and power of the ADBs, this is going to be not good thing in terms of their interest. So I think China is also a big powers, and they have certain kind of policy orientation. Therefore, in course of the times, there will be some kind of management of the dissolution of the conflicting issues, and so there will be the good result to come out. I am not pessimistic about any confrontations because China, United States is not small countries to be preoccupied with small matters to bring in a big catastrophe later.
Interesting. Could Seoul also take advantage of its relationship with China to pressure Japan on dealing with the historical issues?
Oh, for me, from the China's government, it is not the only historical issues. It is the strategic issues to holding South Korea to keep close China, using the historical conflict between South Korea and Japan. But for me, we have to be very careful to work China to criticize Japan, because the historical legacy issue is not the only regional countries' historical disputes. It is the fundamentally human dignity issues. And we have to talk about universal values of international community, that is human rights issues. So if we work together with China, it can be a China, South Korea bashing Japan. Probably the international community can be misunderstood what is the nature of these issues. We have to work respectively and appeal to the international community what is the fundamental problem of these historical issues. What was the atrocity during the World War II happened by Japanese Imperial Army means to the current international society and human rights issues. So for me, we should be very careful to work with China to criticize Japan's historical perspective.
Do you think China and South Korea working together to deal with some humanitarian as well as historical issues, will that be successful?
I think there's not better any cooperations. That is an outburst of natural sentiments prevalent in China and Korea. I think Japanese government is in the process of learning a big thing because of their recent actions. They didn't expect that China, Korea was so strongly coming up against. Also, the United States was a little bit reluctant. So Japanese must have thought that when they pursue these things, there will be firm support of the United States and non-opposition from the Koreans and some kind of compromise with China. But the situation became completely different. They must be aghast, surprised, strong opposition and the reaction. So they will learn, the situation, and they will moderate their reactions so that they will come up some sort of, frameworks which will be acceptable both, the three parties, U.S., Korea, and China, because no country become a single power standing above the rest of us.
Well, let's get a second opinion on that. We have Professor Andrew Nathan from Columbia University standing by for us. Professor, what's your take on South Korea and China cooperating together to try to solve some historical issues?
That cooperation is very powerful, but I think it's producing negative effects in Japan. In other words, if the purpose of China and South Korea is really to get Japan to change its way of dealing with history or to change its military policy, then I'm afraid the pressure that they're placing on Japan is counterproductive. It seems to be encouraging nationalism in Japan instead of encouraging reflection on history.
So Seoul and Beijing might want to think twice before proceeding with the idea.
Some people say that the U.S. might raise concerns over the progress in Korea-China relations following Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Korea. Do you also agree?
I think the main concern of the U.S. is with the Korean-Japanese cooperation, because both of these are treaty allies of the United States, and in certain contingencies involving especially North Korea or China, the U.S. would want to be able to cooperate with both South Korea and Japan at the same time. I think a second concern of the United States is that it wants to maintain a common front in its bargaining with North Korea. It doesn't want South Korea, or Japan for that matter, to seek a separate arrangement with North Korea. But other than those two concerns, I don't think the U.S. is too worried if South Korea and China develop more and more close relations, close economic relations, or even close political relations.
All right, thank you very much, sir. That was Professor Andrew Nathan from Columbia University.
Dr. Kim, when we cannot overlook North Korea when it comes to Korea and China relations, President Xi Jinping visited Seoul first instead of visiting Pyongyang. Can you looking at this consider as a sign of diminishing ties between Beijing and Pyongyang?
Oh, for me, not really. The Xi Jinping's visit, President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul, Seoul ahead of Pyongyang, sends a strong message to North Korea that the Chinese government cannot no longer tolerate the North Koreans' arbitrary behaviors, including a series of military provocation and nuclear tests, as well as the long-range missile test, because this arbitrary behavior of North Korea has harmed seriously China's national security interest. That's why the Chinese government wants to readjust relations with North Korea and send a very stern message to North Korea not to do any more this because it is very harm to China's national interest. So for me, the Chinese government, of course, sends a strong message to North Korea, but it doesn't mean China abandoned North Korea. According to the speech of the top leaders of China, I could feel that the Chinese government still maintain a balanced relations with the two Koreas.
So in your opinion, it's more because the Chinese government still thinks North Korea as a valuable key or political card, they are instead just sending a strong message and not really diminishing ties.
Is there any possibility that it could end up hurting inter-Korean relationship?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Probably the North Korean government will use both aggressive and soft policy toward South Korea. At the moment, probably Pyongyang feels isolated by the neighboring countries, but at the same time, Japan wants to open a channel with Pyongyang, and they can exchange their political interest. And also, Russia proposed the economic cooperation with North Korea. So North Korea understands that they can be isolated by the mood of the promoting bilateral relations between South Korea and Japan, South Korea and China. But at the same time, they also proactively open up the door to Russia and Japan. So probably North Korean government will use aggressive policy, at the same time soft policy towards South Korea.
If Kim Jong-un came to feel that there's a limit of endurance, because all kinds of difficulty fighting up, and there's pressure coming up to China, very important, the oil and the food, and also the isolation from other countries. Then they will think, difference. I shall go, self-destructing, self-bombing, suicidal bomb, or I shall, take less glorious, but still, leaving a path. I think he will choose the latter part, of course. That in that case, Xi Jinping is very important, agent because he can make some kind of suggestion to him that if you go this way, you will have our support. You will, through us, you will support of South Korea, also United States. Then the Kim Jong-un's tension will be more relaxed, and he will have more leisure to think about more securities. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have our last connection of the day. Joining us via Skype is Bruce Bechtold, former intelligence officer at the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. Sir, with the advancing relationship between Seoul and Beijing, do you see perhaps the six-party nuclear disarmament talks resuming in the near future?
Well, I certainly think this is something that China would like to see happen, but I don't think it's something that the Republic of Korea or the United States would like to see happen unless there's significant change in the rogue state behavior of the North Koreans. And of course, we haven't seen that. As you probably know, the North Koreans just test launched some Scuds that they actually launched from the West Coast across the peninsula into the East Coast, just recently, just within the past 48 hours. So I don't think that the North Korean behavior is going to be something that motivates either the government of Park Geun-hye or Barack Obama to move very quickly back to the six-party talks. And if I could just make one more statement regarding that, we have precedent here. The six-party talks has been proven to be something that doesn't work. The North Koreans, they use those talks to gain concessions, both economic and political, from both Seoul and Washington. And then right at the moment it looks like we're going to make progress, they back out. And they've done this several times. So I think this is what the Chinese would like us to go back to, because obviously it eases tensions when they're ongoing. But I really don't see it as accomplishing something, or something that the United States or South Korea would be anything other than hesitant to get back to.
Not much about the North Korean nuclear issue was discussed on the bilateral summit. China simply reiterated its position, which was a bit disappointing from Seoul's point of view. What kind of stance do you take on this matter?
Well, I think China was very predictable on this. And frankly, I think that the talks, while they were very encouraging, were also rather predictable. I mean, I don't think China is happy with North Korea's behavior. I think Kim Jong-un has had a difficult time dealing with the Chinese. Just the Chung Sung-taek thing was part of it, because Chung Sung-taek was obviously, one of his key liaison to the PRC. But he's had problems dealing with the Chinese since he came into office. And that's following up on his father, who also had a difficult time at times dealing with the Chinese. So I think what the talks overall show symbolically is very important, because the Chinese met with the South Koreans before they met with the North Koreans. That's a big deal. I think symbolically that's very important. And I think it reiterates the very strong economic relationship that the South Korean government and the Chinese have. But as far as security issues, I still think that the Chinese, as long as it is a PRC, they will still continue to lean toward favoring the North Koreans as long as there is a stable DPRK.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for taking the time to talk to us today. Now, we're seeing a very complex web of ties among many countries, including the U.S., Japan, North Korea, China. All in all, what kind of role is Seoul currently playing in that dynamic?
We have to think of two ways. The first of all, if the U.S.-China relations are one of the competition structure, probably South Korea will be urged to take a side between China and the US. This is the worst case scenario for South Korea. But if the structure will be cooperative, probably South Korea government can extend our own diplomatic room in the Northeast Asian international politics. At the same time, we will expand our national interest and role between the US and China in the future. So we have to, we should make our efforts to be a strategic bridge role between China and US. That is the picture is very complicated and intertwined, but we have to follow our own principles.
And Ambassador Huang?
Well, I think Korea is in the good positions to make important roles in establishing peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia. If that is happens, everything will be created, changed and toward happy results. And if we manage matter of the North Koreas between China and Korea, between the United States and Koreas, then the Korean Peninsula will become an arena of the new kind of cooperations between U.S. and China. That is President Park's important missions. So he should develop that kind of security scheme here. Then he can relax tension in these areas, and this is what all of us want. In that case happens, Japan's strange ambition will be subdued and less degraded. Therefore, President Park has big opportunities to play active roles in the lessening the tensions in East Asian region, also North Korea problems, and all U.S. and China's relationships.
So, also a big task.
Yeah. Since you mentioned President Park, President Park has mentioned something called Asia paradox, which refers to increase in economic interdependency, along with increase in political and security conflict in Northeast Asia.
I mean, so how could China and South Korea approach and broaden their scope of cooperation during the era of so-called Asia paradox?
Right. For me, the fundamental causes of the Asian paradox is the lack of trust between U.S. and China. At the same time, the contents of the competition structure between the two superpowers. So for South Korea, if the Asian paradox lasted in the future, that will be very disadvantageous to South Korea. So South Korean government should take a balancing bridge role between the two superpowers, so that we have to make our regional structure from competition-oriented to the cooperative-centered. That should be what we have to do in the future.
Right. So in particular, what do you think lies ahead for the Park Geun-hye administration? You did mention President Park has a huge role and mission that she has to complete.
I think he should complete, the a kind of the normalization of the relationship with other countries, because now we are entering into normalized relationship with China, the unconstrained of the legacy of the past, and then you are moving the new kind of things, and we are also entering the difficult situation with Japan, and we should discuss with them and normalize the pattern. So also he should strengthen further with the normalization. So Korea should become very normal big countries enjoying a normal kind of relationship with all other member countries. Yes.
So the administration is definitely at a critical point right now. Any plans or detailed plans that could help the government at this point to handle the situation in Northeast Asia? Okay.
One of the important things is we have to talk with the U.S. As well as talk with China. Particularly, we have to explain the specific issues to the U.S. government, because U.S. government has a whole pictures of the world community and East Asia. But if we go into the very specific issues, they always suffered from the lack of information. So we have to talk with the U.S. And we have to try to reduce the different ideas and different approaches between China and the U.S. That can, the way of the South Korean government, increase our national interest and strategic role in the Northeast Asian international politics in the future.
So the winds are definitely changing in Northeast Asia, and we will continue to keep a close eye on the developments. But thank you very much, both of you, for coming onto the show and taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.